Thanks to all of our sponsors for being here, and many of them have been with this series, which came over from the Daily News, for many, many years and have made it possible, so I really appreciate it. We shifted this, we will go through all the segments, but we shifted a couple years ago because there's so many cool and interesting projects going on to kind of pick a signature project that we'd get somebody. I think we had, if I'm not mistaken, McLean Wilson came and talked about Crosstown, and we've had other folks talk about one of the big ones. Now there's so many that was kind of hard, but it seemed obvious, and Chance Carlisle from the Carlisle Corporation was nice enough to agree to talk about One Beale and all the things that are going on. I think we're...
All right. Well, Eric, thank you very much for having me today, and I will try to be brief because I have a bunch of slides, and then you guys can probably open this thing up to Q&A faster. Is it? That one's the advance. Perfect. I'm like, because you handed me like, that looks upside down. All right. For those who don't know, One Beale is located at Riverside Drive and Beale Street, probably one of the city's most famous intersections. Recently, in 2006, we sort of had a breakthrough in that we were able to acquire the Ellis buildings, which was about 3 acres that sat directly behind our property. So if we're looking at this image, we owned the riverfront property, but the land behind it, and sort of the backwards F, we didn't control. It's been in the Ellis family since literally the 1860s. Imagine, for all those who do real estate and title work, going back and pulling a title that hadn't been updated since the 1860s. In fact, we're working on a railroad issue from an easement that was granted in 1925 when there was actual train tracks in Wagner Street, because it hasn't been removed yet. And so this allowed us to sort of rethink the development in totality about what we wanted to do and how we wanted to design the site, with probably downtown's #1 issue being parking and having a site that was almost entirely on the riverfront. We had a big unlock in where we're going to put a garage. And the Ellis property allowed us to figure out the garage solution in that we could wrap it with apartments, and I'll show that solution here in a second, which led to a second unlock for us is, what do we do with these great historic buildings other than knock them down? And in a little bit, I'll tell you how we came up with the existing design. So this is an aerial of the site that we're talking about. Beale Street's the far street on the right. Riverside Drive is on the slide upper. And this is our current site plan. So we applied for a PUD and are going through the final plat. But One Beale in its current iteration, and it's gone through a lot, I know, and hopefully final, is a hotel at the corner of Beale and Front Street. It's the sort of the pinkish area. It'll be a 227-room, Hyatt-centric, 14,000 square feet of meeting space with a amenity-laden full-service hotel, the likes of which, unfortunately, in Memphis, we're not that accustomed to. We'll have a rooftop sky lounge, a resort-style pool, and a 14,000, 15,000 square foot conference room in the Ellis's. The office tower is on the corner of the famed One Beale Street that we're working in partnership with Highwoods to deliver. That'll be hopefully around 300,000 square feet. And for anyone who has clients or tenants, please contact Steve, as he said. We're interested to get that started. And then the apartments. The apartments are 232 Class A luxury apartments, and sometimes people say, oh, don't use the word luxury. I'm going to say luxury. And quite frankly, and I'll get to this a little bit later, it's, in my opinion, the first Class A institutional apartment community in downtown Memphis, and probably in the city itself. And there's a lot of reasons for why I think we haven't developed more Class A property, but hopefully by the end of this and into the Q&A, we'll all leave here understanding that we need a lot more developments like what we're building in the multifamily. This is a couple images of the pier surroundings, and of course the assets that we have in downtown, the Orpheum, historic Beale Street, the FedEx Forum, the trolleys that have returned really do provide a very rich sense of character an identity that I think is, having worked in downtown almost my entire life, really gives it a rich sense of history. And something we feel important to kind of carry as we start to remap what 5.5 acres of riverfront property would look like. So our theme for the hotel, when we brought in Hyatt, Chicago-based firm, was not to lose sight of our heritage and really blend sort of our historic past, but also sort of move the city forward. And NEDAC, HBG Design, who's the architect for the hotel, came up with this mission statement, which I thought is perfect really for all of One Beale. Truly to be a central crossroads and embracing change and honoring where we've been, but also looking for where we want to go as a city. So here's the hotel site, and you see the Ellis buildings that we have incorporated into, which is a fascinating story on its own, but I will say that when we first had our hotel partner to the city, it was built as small of a hotel as possible that could still be full service, with a restaurant that's basically not really a restaurant, just a place you can kind of pick up food, no meeting space, and as as few rooms as the city would let us get by with and still qualify for a pilot. 2, adding almost 50, 60 rooms to the hotel, adding 3 F&B outlets, and then adding 15,000 square feet of meeting space. So the more and more that we got into what the hotel should look like and feel, and the more time they spent in Memphis, the more we all came to understand that we need a heck of a lot more full-service hotels with these amenities than we need limited service hotels. Sort of a rendering. This is sort of some imagery work that gets us to what we think the hotel should look like, using imageries of sort of our industrial past, not necessarily the current condition that they're in. And yes, some of this stuff were shots out of the Ellis building themselves. This is sort of a shot of what the lobby may look like. This is now sort of an updated rendering. I know we have the rust-colored rendering that's been around, but this is more of an updated look of where we've sort of progressed the design in the latest rounds. One of the coolest things about this image is that we want to tie into the bridge lighting. And so both, if you've seen the Mighty Lights program, where we are in this, we think we can synchronize the bridge and our lights, and I think that'd be a really fascinating look. I'm just going to go through these things for the sake of time, just to give you an idea of where we sort of have this thing. That shows you sort of the conference center too, from Wagner Street. And this is sort of gives you an idea of the rooftop bar, something that you would more accustomed to see in cities like Atlanta, Dallas, Nashville. We should have 15 of these, but we'll be glad to bring the first one. So moving on over to the apartments. This is The Landing, is the working title for this. We'll finalize the name of it here as we get our branding consultants on. It's, like I said, 232 apartments on the riverfront. Connects to the trolley station that you can see sort of in the lower right-hand corner, which we are redoing and repaving, sort of a kind of an abandoned line today, but I think it'll be the primary point that we'll have from the convention center to Beale Street. So as the city invests in upgrading the convention center, and as people start to use the trolley line, hopefully it'll be back up and running. We think that'll be the main thoroughfare that people will activate Beale Street. So if you think about where our 5.5 acres is and where Beale Street is today, a big part of this is to connect both the river, our development, and Beale Street in a very comprehensive design, which I'm very proud to be working with Carol Collette and the River Parks Partnership and the Downtown Memphis Commission to do. This is just a couple of renderings of what the streetscape down there would look like. This is from Wagner. This is a second-story elevated courtyard that'll also be part of it. And then this is sort of a kind of the restaurant that will be restaurant kind of courtyard dining patio area that's also in the development. All right, so there we go. Oh, all right, so Those are all the pretty pictures, and I got a few minutes left, but I will not take too much. One of the things that I wanted to get in about the apartment building really quickly is, thank you, Natalie, is that Memphis apartment developers, and maybe Blake and some others will touch on this later, have really catered to a market that is what we refer to as metro renters. It's the largest segment in downtown, but one of the segments that has been really lost is upper income renters in Memphis. And to put this into perspective, there's a very well-respected analytical firm called ESRI, and they have a psychodemographic group called Laptops and Lattes. And it is Memphis's second most common demographic. Almost 21% of downtown households would fall into this category. They make about $95,000 a year, and household income is about 1.8 per household, and they are completely underserved in Memphis. There's literally zero supply for this group, and they are the fastest growing segment of one of our peer cities, Nashville, who we're often compared to. But I wanted to give just some facts about how this works, comparing a little bit of downtown and Nashville, because one of the things that I hear often is, why isn't one Beale a high rise, or why don't we have more cranes in the sky, or why can't we change our skyline as dramatically as Nashville? And I think really one big part of the solution to this is we don't cater to our wealthiest or our wealthier residents, particularly in downtown. So the Memphis downtown population is 26,000. Nashville's downtown population is 14,000. We have more people making over 90,000, close to about 12,000, than Nashville has almost in total population downtown, 14,000. So when we look at projects like One Beale, who are catering to an upper income level, or even a further up the income chain, urban chic, it's not because we don't have the population or we don't have the purchasing power as downtown Memphians, and that's all within a 5-minute drive of downtown. It's literally we don't have any supply. And one of our biggest challenges for the longest time has been convincing lenders and other institutions that we'll have people who would pay the rates we're asking for, when quite frankly, I think the question really should be turned on its head and asking, why don't we have more developers creating the product that people are really looking for? Downtown is 95% occupied. On the higher end, it's nearly non-existent, almost 100%. Rates have gone up multiple years in a row, and yet we still continue to cater to, quite frankly, the metro renter, who is basically your person who's 2, 3, 5, 7 years out of college. And I've taken up enough time, Eric, but and happy to get into it more, but I really do challenge everyone who is in development or financing of apartments, and as they're looking at downtown and Pacific, to really keep pushing the envelope of what we have, because we have such a tremendous opportunity to cater and elevate the quality of living in downtown that will, I think, continue to drive the public discourse in a different way than what is currently, and it doesn't take public incentives, and it doesn't take outside capital. It really takes us just changing the mentality of what we're doing ourselves. All right, thank you.
We'll go through the market segments now. First up is Andy Cates from Colliers International.
Hey, while she's doing this, I'm going to tell a really brief story. So 20 and a half years ago, I started at Colliers International. And at that time, I was introduced to Dan Wilkinson, who is in the room today. And I got to tell you, I think we all owe a lot to Dan for what he's done for our industry. He's been in it for, we had 57 years, Dan? 58 years. And so if y'all will grant me this, I'd like to give Dan a round of applause. Thank you, Dan, for paving the way for, mainly all of us here today. I'm going to run through a little bit of what's going on in our market. Here's an industrial snapshot it's kind of the down and dirty of what you're seeing happening. What's interesting, if you look at total inventory, probably in 2014, it was 220 million square feet. So we're developing pretty quickly. You're seeing a lot happening, really kind of the spigot turned loose in 14 and 15, and people started really building back in the market. We have a lot of warehouse under construction, and we have a lot of deliveries. And I'm going to talk through those more directly as we kind of get into this from in more detail. But the two things that stand out is our absorption so far is 2.3 million or 2.1 million. I think probably in 6 weeks that number could double. I mean, I really do feel, Kemp and I were talking about earlier, there's a lot going on. There's a lot that's happened where that number is going to be pretty robust as we get into it. And the other thing is the Class A asking rates. Asking rates are a joke. I mean, everybody knows that, but I do think it's an interesting way to track things. Asking rates now are $340, $350 a foot. Deal rates are probably a little less than that, but not too long ago they were $315 a foot. So we're seeing a good increase in that. We're seeing a really good increase in the comps too. As we get into what's happening in our market, one thing that jumps out to me more than anything else is the change of the guard, change of the owners. Here's the top list of the top owners. So Exeter Property Group is 20 million feet. I didn't ask them this morning if they bought anything because they may have bought something this morning. But they're at about 20 million feet. Then Blackstone and Aries and Olenbeck, I was talking to Bryce a minute ago, they're at 8.1 million feet. So in 2014, the top 5 owners of space just was Prologis, DCT, Clarion, Bells, USAA, and probably Panattoni was in there too. Pretty interesting to see that none of those people today are. And that's because they developed the property to sell it to these more institutional investors. And it's just how properties cycle through. The active developers is really pretty tricky for our market. You know, I mean tricky, I think that's a really good way. I mean, IDI's been here a long time. They built 829 and a 347, which they leased the 347. Hillwood's got 2 buildings. They delivered 2 buildings this year, leased them both. They had some good help doing that. And they got 2 other buildings that they've got broken ground on that's coming up as well. Exeter, who's been buying a bunch of properties, is going to start developing properties. Core 5 has built 2 buildings. Johnson Development built a big 815. So those are all really exciting. And Robinson Weeks Partners is actually announced and broken ground on a building in Memphis, which is pretty awesome too. That Kemp has a lot to do with that as well. So it's been really good to see some of these new players coming into our market where, you know, it's really been 4 guys for a long time, or 4 guys and girls, but it's been 4 developers for a really long time. So that's nice to see a lot of other folks get in here. All right, so I broke down the deals. Everybody likes to see what's the big deal, right? So here's the big deals, but I did it differently than normal. So this is Shelby County. I feel like there's a lot of discussion all the time about what's happening in DeSoto County, Shelby County. The Memphis area is strong. The Memphis area is good. It's been good for both sides of the line this year. These are a lot of transactions that have been really backfilling space. Space has been redeveloped, where people are expanding and growing. And it's really, really positive. I could go through all these, but I think what you should see that stands out, you know, now we're back in DeSoto County, Mississippi, where, you know, you're seeing 900,000 feet, 700,000 feet. These are big transactions that that you need a lot of people to work in a lot of these buildings too. And that's a little bit of what I'm going to talk about. But it's pretty exciting to see all the volume that's happening. And then there's probably 10 deals or maybe 8 deals on here that are not done yet. And I'm not going to, you know, I'm not going to share that information, whoever the reporters are for the Daily Memphian. But they're coming, and there's great deals that are out there that are exciting about filling up space, which is going to trigger more good things to happen from the industrial side. We're on to the construction side. There's a couple things I really want to point out here. You might be able to read this chart. But if I just went through it real quickly, the build-to-suit for Gateway Global, that building is leased. The Polk Lane building, that's a spec building for Exeter. Is anybody from Exeter here? All right, well, they got a tenant for half that building. They just hadn't signed it yet. Then there's some really good stuff going on in the Marshall County building. And then there's a lot of new property. Hillwood's going to announce 2 buildings. They're 543. Right in Legacy Park, building number 6 and building number 5 are going to come out of the ground. Lots of activity. If you drive around and you're driving to the lake on Highway 78, get off the road, drive around, you'll see a lot of what's happening here off of Lamar and off of 72 and 302. Deliveries for the year, which is kind of tricky here too, is you got Legacy Park with the 927. That building is completely leased, thanks to my buddy Brad Murchison out there. Crossroads has an 829. The I-22 spec building has got a tenant for half the building that's about to sign. The Amazon building was leased when they built it. They built it for them. Core 5's building has good activity on it. The other 300,000 foot spec building, they did a 200,000 foot lease on. Pera built the building for themselves. Legacy Park built that building spec, and both of those, that space is leased. This is all new deliveries this year that have come online with a lot of really strong activity. I think it says a lot about the strength of our market, and I think it says a lot about, you know, the product that is being developed here today and how it matches up with the rest of the country. So what's next? New construction is going to keep happening. More people are coming to the market. Some people are buying smaller sites. We had a guy buy a smaller site, 10, 15 acres to build 157,000 feet. Typically, people don't do that because it's just really expensive, but the rental rates have gotten to where people think they can do it. Robinson Weeks coming to the market, building in Memphis is exciting. There's other guys that have options on land all around town, so it's really good. The rates are going to continue to tick up, but the developers and landlords in the room will tell you it's still going to be real competitive. They're going to do what they can do to win your business. Demand across all classes is really surprising. I mean, we got guys in our office that are trying to find a 100,000 foot building to buy, and that just is not out there today. It used to be your list was 2 pages. Now it's a lot harder to find good stuff. Absorption is going to get bigger. The two things that I think are really going to be for our market outlook are, you know, our labor market. We're on calls all the time trying to figure out what other markets are doing, what owners from other offices are talking about, and every single one of them, their number one issue is labor. Customers are not necessarily looking for the real estate as much as they're looking for the labor force. And that's really where it's going to be pretty dynamic for Memphis to be able to stay in front of that. And that's really going to define our progress, I believe, going forward. And also, I almost put this as an afterthought, and then I thought how stupid it was. So they opened the outer loop of the I-269, and that's a huge deal. Like, it's a massive deal. I think we've all talked about it for so long that we don't, you know, it doesn't really come across. But that's really exciting. I think that's going to open up easier ways for labor to get to different locations. The key there will be the road is there, but is the infrastructure there? You know, it takes a lot of water to sprinkle these buildings, and that'll be what probably trails behind the road being open. But I think that's huge for Memphis and huge for our growth going forward. And that is all I got on the industrial market.
Next up is Kemp Conrad from Cushman & Wakefield Commercial Advisors.
Perfect. Thank you. Thanks, Eric. Thanks, Natalie, for hosting this. Just want to recognize my Cushman & Wakefield colleagues that are here. Just raise your hand quickly if you could. Thank you all. It's a privilege to work beside you every day, and I want to thank Ashley Crouch and Casey Flannery who helped with this deck. So thank you very much. And for everybody that's here, thanks for being here. One of my new favorite sayings is, you know, be militant with your time, but generous with people. And so really time's one of our biggest assets. So we appreciate you being here today, and hopefully we'll give you some nuggets to take with you as we all leave here. I'm going to talk about the office market. The office market usually isn't as dynamic with a lot of huge ebbs and flows around rates or occupancy. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the market as it is today, but really focus about kind of what's next and a couple trends and why I think the Memphis market is really uniquely positioned to take advantage of what's going on. If you've heard our mayor recently, I'm going to riff on him. You know, he says Memphis has momentum. Got about $15 billion of projects from 2014 to today that are either done, in process, or being completed. It's a tremendous amount of real estate economic activity in the metro. And Andy mentioned labor and the importance of labor on the industrial side. It's just as important on the office side, although a little bit different. And we're in the tightest labor market that we've had in 18 years. And the number one issue that corporate users, corporates, people that use office space, the biggest challenge is attracting, identifying, recruiting, and retaining the workforce. And office space matters in that environment, especially for Gen Z and millennials like myself. Yeah, like I've got a back brace over here. That's not me. That's most of y'all in this room. So, right, but seriously, very, very important. And what's really, really neat is how Memphis is doing with millennials. So our millennial population has increased 10% the last couple years. We are a top 5 city for millennial growth, and those millennials are putting down roots in Memphis. We're the fourth largest market in terms of where millennials are buying homes. And all that is a really, really great story when we talk about growing businesses in Memphis that are using office space, and when we talk about recruiting more industries into the area. So I'm going to talk about what typically those folks like, what office users are looking for, and how that fits into what's going on in Memphis. Before I do that, I'm going to hit a few things just on deals. We looked at 15,000 feet and above, and I'll try to kind of give reference to everything. A couple familiar names on the list here, FedEx. A lot of these are kind of moving from one building to another on some of these projects, not like organic growth or whatnot. But you've got a lot of things in the 20, 30,000 square foot range. You'll notice most of these are out east. The Mid-America apartment deal kicked off a new building, 145,000 foot building. It's actually in Germantown, and that transaction there. V. Alexander is actually having their open house today. What's interesting is they chose this location at Germantown Park largely. One major reason was because of the proximity to Shelby Farms and the amenities there and how important that was to their strategy over the next 10 years from a recruiting standpoint. Campbell Clinic, big story, 120,000 square feet, $30 million medical project, again out in Germantown. And you'll notice most of these are out east, and I'm going to kind of transition in a minute to what's going on in the core city and downtown. And then, of course, Indigo, which is in the Toyota Center downtown at 21,500 feet. So our core office market has typically been kind of Poplar 240. It's the geographic center of the MSA, where a lot of folks live, a lot of people go to school, et cetera. And I'm going to talk about a shift I think we're going to see over the next several years back downtown in a very meaningful, durable way. Andy hit on this, and I wanted to just hit on this as well, but we've also seen a pretty big capital shift within office users from more institutional owners, maybe longtime Memphis holders, more longtime Memphis owners to more private equity, kind of value-added private equity buyers. And this is just a sampling of some of those, and this is mostly focused on this year. Limbeck's another one that's been buying this office product. These transactions represent about 10% of the entire market, about 2 million square feet that's transitioned, and we're seeing a lot more people that are buying real estate in a lot of places coming to Memphis like it and investing here. And a lot of these folks can sometimes be maybe more entrepreneurial than, or more not as risk averse as maybe more long-time owners that are more into preservation of capital. They're more into wealth creation, possibly taking more risk. And so you just get a different mindset in terms of other projects and the way they look at the market. And I think this is going to benefit Memphis as well. We talked briefly about this millennials, Gen Z. This is Cushman and Wakefield research, top 5 rankings in terms of what actual users are looking for, maybe not a decision maker, but people in companies in the largest metros. You'll see the importance of fitness. So 3/4 of the folks, think fitness centers are important. Food, outdoor space, common areas. A lot of these things now, it's hard to build maybe in a building or expensive. And so when you look at amenities in a downtown area, in a more dense area, walkable, you get a lot of these things around it without an office developer having to build it into the space. And again, I think if you look at our market and what's available in Midtown and downtown, you see a lot of these things that are around, maybe not in a building, that are important to people. I talked about this a couple years ago, just another quick trend. There are a lot, hard to talk about it all in 8 minutes. Co-working is one. We're not going to get into that, but I see Frank Quinn, who does a great job running the CB office here. They've got beautiful new space, but it's not quite as spacious, right? It's a little more dense, and our office is more dense. Everybody's trying to do more with less. And so this shows the trend over the last decade in terms of this is per square feet per person in an office space. And hopefully we're at a point where it's about to flatten out. But this is something that we expect to continue and then moderate. I think this is really interesting in terms of just a macro trend that's something to watch, and especially if you're financing office projects, you're a developer of office projects. And it's about automated vehicles. 31% of the land in CBDs in the top 41 metros are for parking, okay? There's 2 times as much parking space than there is actual office space. And owned cars, if you have a car, the average is it's parked 95% of the time. So it's kind of an area that's ripe for disruption. What Cushman and Wakefield, what we predict is over the next decade to 2 decades, we're going to have widespread adoption of self-driving vehicles. And so for developers of office space, it has major implications in terms of how we build space. Just 2 days ago, Waymo got a permit in California for fully automated self-driving vehicle test. Okay, so this is happening right now. In Memphis, you've got Turo rideshare. I was looking at today, you can rent a car for $50, $60 a day and hire a car. And I know that Steve is very forward-looking in his plan with Chance at One Beale, and the way they're going to be building their parking deck is it's going to be parking, but it's going to be designed so that it can be converted later to office space, living space, space that can be used and not cars. And so this is something that's going to happen probably faster than any of us think, and is just really, I think, interesting. And if you look at what's going on now, just with scooters and shared mobility options, transit, a lot going on in this space that affects the office market. I think we're at a tipping point, and we talked a lot about Crosstown the last couple of years and now ServiceMaster. But I think the opportunity we have in front of us is kind of authentically Memphis, and it's a competitive advantage now that we have. If you look at how we have developed as a city, if you go to a Nashville or Charlotte, it's a lot of brand new buildings and things like this, and we've got some of that here, and we'll have more. But historic rehab, and specifically office into historic rehab. And I had a couple slides I didn't put in, but one is inflation. If you look at all the inflation forecast, it's going up. And if you look at construction numbers, it's going up as well. And so if you look at historic rehab, where you already have the concrete and the bricks and a lot of things that can be used, it really lends itself to developing more in this environment as opposed to going ground up. Also, oftentimes, and especially in Memphis, you have tax credits that are available that make these more able to do. And these are also typically in more urban areas. And so I think for these reasons, and we've seen it with Crosstown, ServiceMaster, and the popularity of what the people that work in those and all the amenities that they have tied into it. Where people work now, it's so much more important than just the 4 walls. It's what's happening outside of the 4 walls and all the amenities that are nearby. And also, labor is becoming much more important than cost. So if I'm a new company, I'm coming to Memphis and I need 100,000 feet and I want to hire the best people, I'm probably going to be okay to pay $40 a foot and maybe in Steve's new building or in a really awesome historic rehab, because the labor and the workforce is so much more important than a little bit more of rent. And I think as a community, we're just getting a little bit more confident and ambitious in being able to sell that story. And so I think that's going to kick off a couple different things, most of them downtown. Actually, some of these have been kicked off, right? The Edge District, there's a very nice office component in that area. Again, mixed use. One Beale, we've talked about today, 300,000 square feet. I think the market's big enough for some really exciting rehab projects and also really nice new construction. Historic rehab's not for everybody. 100 North Main, the Lowe's Hotel that's been announced downtown near this project. I think something will happen there. The Snuff District that the Orgel family has now acquired north of the Auction Bridge on the east side of the Wolf River. Hopefully we'll have an office component. There's some other things in the mix. So a lot of things downtown that are really, really interesting for office users. Just yesterday, Loeb announced, this is going back to Poplar 240, a redevelopment of the site there. And as a part of that mixed-use development, there'll be a 40,000 square foot office user in a build-to-suit. And I think what you're seeing in reaction to this is Les and Steve and some of the East Memphis owners came to the city and put together a plan for a TIF in the Poplar corridor, tax increment financing, where we will be investing $40 million roughly in today's dollars back into that kind of Poplar 240 area to really make it a lot nicer and better than it is now, really to compete with downtown. So what's now our core market, I think those guys and gals saw an opportunity to reinvest and to make that a better area. So that's going to be real exciting what happens there over the next several years. So what's next? I predict a huge just fourth quarter. Is Jennifer here, Oswald here? There she is. Jennifer does a great does a great job downtown with the Downtown Memphis Commission, and I think we're going to see a couple very large announcements around office users and also new development. And so Jennifer and her team are going to have a very, very big fourth quarter that should be great for all of Memphis. Thank you very much.
Next up, Blake Pera from ARA Newmark, talking about multifamily.
Like Andy, I've been doing this for about 20 years now, and I think we all had to start off in the basement. Nobody knew what apartments were. Now we're invited, and I appreciate that. Thank you. No longer a bad word, except maybe in Germantown at the moment. And being in Germantown, I hear that all the time. I'll start off maybe just with some high-level stuff, what's going on in the market. Everybody here pretty much knows that we're in a banner year in terms of sales across the market in all sectors. We are expected to exceed the 2015 peak in all sales. Apartments make up about a third of that currently, so we're extremely active across the country. Deliveries nationwide, new construction is up as well. Major markets, basically the coastal markets, make up about 40% of all the new supply. A ton of international capital coming into the market. Canada, which is about 40% of the overall international capital, is investing here, while we're also seeing quite a bit locally from Israel, seeing a lot of Asia as well, either investing or co-investing with American companies. Debt continues to be a main driver for apartments. The agencies make up about half of the debt in the overall commercial real estate sector. So I think this was a pretty interesting graph, and no offense to the other sectors, but what we're seeing now is pretty unprecedented. This shows basically the 12, 24, 36, and 48-month trends of appreciation, price appreciation. As you can see, in apartments, we're over 40% appreciation over price growth over the last 4 years. There's many factors for that. Obviously, a good economy, low unemployment. There's a wave of new, nicer, more expensive product being delivered. There's cheap debt. There's a lot of equity chasing deals. And I think most important is the demand, and something you pointed out earlier is based on a recent Freddie Mac survey, about 66% of renters decided it was more affordable to continue to rent than to buy a home. So that certainly has been a trend, and that is actually up about 10 points since just February. So I don't think that is changing anytime soon. A few things on a national level to take a look at. Sales volume, as you can see, has been significant. Third quarter is outpacing basically the last 4 years, so we're on target basically to have another record year in multifamily. I think year to date across the country is about $159 billion. That's up about 8%. Big reason for this, obviously, bigger rent growth, but also cap rate compression with the cheap debt and a ton of equity out there. We're seeing cap rates compress to the levels that we've never seen, again, in my 20 years, and certainly much longer than that. Overall cap rates in the market across the country is about 5.4%. That's down about 10 bips from this time last year. At the same time, secondary markets like us and tertiary markets are down 20 basis points. Basically, everybody's chasing yield right now. So people are coming into markets like a Memphis and even going into some smaller markets. And obviously with that correlation is the rent per unit. Sale prices are going up quite a bit. Secondary markets are seeing all-time highs, as well as the primary markets as well. From a debt perspective, we're in a little bit of a lull compared to last year, but as you can see, the next 4 years are going to be pretty good activity for refis and sales, so we certainly should continue to see more activity going forward. About a third of all the loans are multifamily product out there currently. In terms of sales activity, across the country, we're seeing the middle markets, especially the, kind of excluding the coastal markets, seeing a tremendous amount of activity, almost 55%. Tertiary markets are also seeing quite a bit of uptick because, again, people chasing yield, willing to go down into smaller markets like a Jackson, Mississippi, even down on the coast. Sale prices, again, are up pretty much, and although For example, in Jackson, Mississippi, we had a property trade for over 200 a door. For our measure, that's a pretty significant bump, especially in a tertiary market. That would be a record for Memphis, and that basically doubled the previous sales record for Jackson, Mississippi. So again, all of this equity coming into these markets are basically shattering any preconceived notions of what a ceiling in terms of pricing would be. So I think this graph's kind of interesting. It shows how the markets, a lot of the markets, are stacking up. On the left, you'll see the employment growth, and to the right, the effective rent growth. So this is a far better position for Memphis than we've seen in the past. You will see markets like Nashville at the top left, Austin, obviously has a really strong employment growth story, but they're also building a ton of units. Nashville, for example, is building around 10,000 units. Memphis usually delivers around 1,000 or just a little bit less than that. So people are catching up, and there's a little bit of overbuilding right now in a lot of those markets. So Memphis, I think, has a really good, compelling story, and I think what we were talking about earlier with better product coming on, I think we'll start seeing that over the next couple of years as national developers start coming on the scene. So in terms of the Memphis market, 2018 is on pace to be our second best sales year in the last 15 years, second only to 2006. We're tracking over $480 million in sales. In 2019, which we're already seeing a pipeline starting to stack up, should be another strong year for us. Some of the notable transactions we've had, 2 properties built by Fogelman back in the 80s, Country Squire and Greenbrook. Several of the larger properties in the market, all traded within about 4 months of each other. So those properties traded. Registry at Wolf Chase closed about a month ago at just under $49 million. All of these properties traded to out-of-town groups. All of them were first-time buyers in the market, and all of them are looking at doing value add. So they're going to spend some additional dollars, upgrade the units, push rents to boost the yields. So as we all know, a lot of the deliveries here in the apartment business have been really concentrated downtown. We're starting to see a pickup in Midtown, but primarily in the suburbs, downtown, Germantown and Collierville have been the big markets. Not tracked on this graph, but you're seeing a tremendous amount of repositioning activity. About 5% of the overall market is currently going through some level of upgrades. So again, it's a way for buyers to boost their yields while they're buying lower compressed cap rates. In terms of supply, we're generally tracking the last 5 years around 700 units total. We have been in and around that level going forward. I think next year we're looking at around 900 units. Some of those may get pushed back. You're having obvious troubles in Germantown with a couple sites getting approved and moving forward. You're also having some issues with several bigger sites in Cordova, with the sewer basin issues that they're dealing with. So some of that can be pushed off and be pretty balanced over the next couple of years. We're seeing, again, around 500 to 900 units being built. So with the developers primarily being local for the most part since the recession, I think you've seen pretty even, consistent delivery schedules. We will start to see a little bit more activity when national guys start coming, which we're seeing over the next few years. So this is an encouraging graph for us. We usually are kind of at the bottom of most markets across the country. But with our kind of steady supply growth and good economy right now, we're starting to see some really nice rent growth, including this year and going forward next year. We're starting to see about probably 3 to 4% rent growth across the market. And some of these better submarkets are downtown and even Germantown, Collierville. We're starting to see as much as 8% or more rent growth, and we have not seen that in a long time. The Germantown, Collierville, and the downtown Memphis submarkets basically hold about a 60% premium in rents compared to the market as a whole. Essentially, our C-grade properties and locations drag down the overall stats a little bit. So the people that have been very successful in this market have been able to figure out that basically it is where you buy it. It really depends on how well you will do in the future. So a lot of things have already been mentioned about what's going on in the market, but I think there is a great opportunity to come in and build a lot more very nice Class A product. especially downtown and in Midtown, given everything that's going on in the medical corridor and the move downtown as well. So thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Oh, wait, you're doing this. Okay. Last but not least is Shawn Massey talking about, from the shopping center group, talking about retail. Look at it. Just because I touched it. Shawn has 50 slides, but has promised to keep this in line. But he said I could stand up if he does.
You got on that part, but I don't know if I'm the elder statesman or I prefer the cleanup hitter on talking about. I'm kind of going a little different about talking about retail for us today. I want to kind of talk about the macro industry of retail and where it's going, and kind of the title I've been using around the country, speaking is Not Your Grandparents' Shopping Center, talking a little bit about the transition of where retail is going. In the past, we developed strip retail, big box retail. Not that that's going away anytime soon, but that's not where we're going. Retail is undergoing a big transformation that we're going through, and we're starting to look at it very different. Retail is changing dramatically. In the U.S. population, the households, we have a dwindling middle class, an increased gap between haves and have-nots, income disparity having a huge impact on retail and their formats, but make no mistake, retail is growing leaps and bounds, but it's going to be different from the past. We're seeing new things from the Crosstown Concourse to the Wonder Bread to the Lake District going on. Retail is taking a new format from where we were before to where we're going tomorrow and tomorrow. It's very much changing as we go along. But so are the retailers. You see the number of retailers coming on, and I didn't want to bring all of the retailers coming in, but we see new formats. Amazon is opening 600 stores, okay? Or I have 600 stores open, they're opening 2,000 in the next 18 months. We're seeing stores like 4Post, which is a store that's for all those retailers that want to go to physical retail, that's the way they're going to go. The first crowdfunding retail store, AT&T is now a coffee shop in many places. A lot of cool type of things retail happening. But you hear a lot of that Sears closing. This is a Sears in California that was able to be recaptured by the developer, put a bunch of money into it, really took a low-price retailer that's no longer relevant, and be able to create this great retail space, mixed-use type space with a lot of placemaking. And we're seeing that around the country in nice upper-end markets, but even in Baltimore, we took an old Sears store and they put it into a bunch of affordable housing, and it's really kind of changed the whole dynamics of the neighborhood. Walmart just announced yesterday that they're going to create town centers. They're bringing Orange Theory, fitness centers, coffee shops to their parking lots. They realize they have a lot of excess parking. So even the biggest retailer out there is reimagining that retail space, that retail spectrum. And that's kind of some really cool stuff that's happening. So my new title is no longer, and we're called the Shopping Center Group, but I really think about retail, building thriving communities and developing dynamic neighborhoods is where the retail aspect is going. And I love my co-presenters talking about changing the public spaces of their office buildings, industrial buildings, how they're looking, how apartments are kind of integrating into that neighborhood. One disclaimer, all these, I have to do this now, sorry, disclaimer, all these opinions are of Shawn Massey, not of the Shopping Center Group, not of the Memphis Board of Realtors, which I am now upcoming current president. So it's based upon my research, so it's just for me. But first of all, I want to say I love Memphis. I am unabashedly, overly optimistic on Memphis. I love the city. I love where it's going. I'm not from here originally, though I've been in the business 32 years, so it's the elder statesman. But I love the city and all it's going for. But I want to talk a little bit about the retail apocalypse. That's a lot of the papers put in. Retail's closed store every year. Ever since retail came out, retailers closed. Okay? Household names. Up 66% of all the retailers closing come from 16 retailers. Bad news sells. I don't want to be up the media, but in the past, the papers, the news, the stuff on the news, the TV channels, if it bleeds, it leads, okay? And then formula, for one, what we call, well, we are changing. You're doing a great job of it. I'd really want to pick. Formula One, outdated business models. Sears became irrelevant. Payless became irrelevant. They couldn't compete with online. A lot of retailers got absorbed by private equity, grew too large, grew too fast, leveraged high with debt owners, lack of investments in new store and technology. We got to compete. We're in a competing environment with online retail, but that's even changing. Okay, let's take growth in the retail industry. We grew 4.5% last year. Okay, that's the same of the total retail economy of South Korea, and that's just our growth. Retail is healthy and moving forward. Okay, look at the headlines. Omnichannel experiential retail banishes a couple of Smith. Retail nails third quarter occupancy, rent, and sales growth. We see these all the time in our national publications and our research that retail is overall very healthy. There are certain areas of town that may be a little bit more difficult. Okay, 2000 year, retail sales growth through July in 2018 up 5.5%. Retail growth projected in 2018, 4.6%. U.S. economy grew an extra $190 billion in retail in 2018. Retail is very healthy. Retail has always gone through an evolution. I used this slide from one of my competitors, but retail has grown from the general store to the main street, to the town square, to the traditional shopping centers, to malls, to power centers, to lifestyle centers. It's always evolved, okay? It's never stopped evolving as we went along. Target, despite the recent announcement of closing in Cordova, a store in Cordova, it's one of 6 stores closing nationwide. Target is opening 30-plus stores around the world. Their reason for closing is not because the retail is dying. It's just reimagining their stores and reshuffling it as we go along. Micro retail and pop-up shops. I am now working with a national wireless company that wants to do pop-up shops all throughout the city, in Whitehaven, in Fraser, on Summer Avenue. Several national retailers are looking to enter a market, and pop-up shops are really cool. I mean, whether it's Edge Alley in Jackson, their pop-up shops are really a success, and we're seeing more and more of those happen. Now let's talk about some numbers, okay? In all the store closings that you hear about, we have 3,835 new stores that opened in the United States. That's a net increase in stores, okay? E-commerce, online sales grew up 18%. Amazon online sales are $29 billion of the growth. But that means that's only 25% of all retail sales growth. 75% of those retail sales growth came from bricks and mortar stores. It's awesome as we go along. Stores will still matter in online sales. Rise of online sales actually helps bricks and mortar stores. Bricks and mortar stores that are opening help online sales. Take Orvis. It's finally realigned their market that when they have a sale, online sale, it gets charged to the Memphis store. That's really stuff that's helping stores. Markets where physical retailer has gone in for an e-commerce store, they saw their increase in sales of about 25%. So physical retail helps e-commerce, e-commerce helps physical retail. It's all about the last mile. So if we're going along the last mile, how do we get goods to consumers very quickly? Stores. Walmart is the second largest online retailer. They can get stuff to people in the same day, especially when we have self-driving cars that Kemp talked about. Those stores become even more important going forward. Walmart's actually increasing their store size, not decreasing their store size going forward. But the last mile is important. The halo effect. I talked about Orvis. Orvis's sales, online sales, increased 27% when they opened the store here in Memphis. The physical retail store opening helps everybody on their online sales. It's no longer either or, but it's the same. One of the things that helped us was the E-Fairness Act, where before you didn't have to pay taxes on the sales that you had online, so it was a lot cheaper. Now that you're paying taxes online, people are going to shop at physical stores because it's the same price, and you can get it the same day. Okay, let's look at retail and food. Over the last 2 years, we had 6,189 stores open last year. That's a positive net count of stores. If you look at it, for every store that you read about closing, 3.7 stores open. Those are real numbers that we have to follow. The stores might be smaller, they might be different, but they're retailers that are relevant today. Why? If you look at all the different segments, only one that's hurting is really department stores. Okay, we're seeing Sears, JCPenney, several other people closing. Look at soft goods and hard goods. People say, I can buy that online. But for every store that closes, 1.5 hard goods and soft goods store opens. Look at restaurant count. Look at all the restaurant growth from Starbucks all the way down to Wingstop, and these are just 16 retailers. around the country, but we're seeing tremendous restaurant growth. We are eating out more often. Net store openings, table service restaurants, those are your chef-driven restaurants. We're seeing a big increase of local restaurants plus national chains open nationwide. Fast food restaurants continue to proliferate, more in 17 than in 18. For every restaurant that closes, 3.3 are opening stores. Despite some failing restaurants, we're seeing great backfills on those restaurants. Okay, now here's a big number. 66% of all the retail stores that have closed in America come from 16 chains that have become irrelevant, forgot about the customer, and trying to help them. Here's a cycle analysis done by Glenn Miller at the University of Denver. Memphis, you can see, is very much in an expansion stage. We have some little sub-markets that might be overbuilt or not relevant today, but we need more retail. We have a less than 3% vacancy rate throughout the city of good quality retail. So we're seeing new developments happening in Fraser, Binghamton, Lakeland, South Haven, great markets to go from. Evolution of retail. To survive a challenging future, shopping malls look at the past. Experts say retail spaces are returning to the roots of community centers. We no longer need to build that power center or that big parking lot where people drive in. We have to build shopping centers that become engaging for people to come to and become that part of that community center. Medical is becoming a big part of retail centers. We didn't see that in the past, but medical people finally figured out that their customers want convenience. Retail centers give a lot of convenience going up there. We're seeing fitness centers next to office buildings all throughout the community. Fitness, where there's Orange Theory, F215, Planet Fitness, they're opening all over the place. They're becoming main staples in a lot of existing shopping centers and shopping centers going forward. New developments, that's kind of what a lot of you want to hear about. We have the Lake District. We started dirt work about a week ago. It's a $410 million project, 300,000 square foot of retail, but it's got 520 luxury apartments, 320 homes, 50,000 square feet of office space. Great project. Silo, another project out of South Haven, Mississippi. Great project, mixed use. This is where retail is going, this new adaptive retail use. New developments, the Citizen, smaller retail project for us, about 10,000 square feet at the corner of Union McLean with apartments above. That's what retail is. It's evolving, kind of changing. Parkside at Shelby Farms, 30,000 square foot of retail, 1,500 apartments, all moving forward. New and expanding retailers. Axe throwing. 5 years ago, we never had axe throwing retailers. Really cool. Now we have multi-story car lots. Really cool. Phoenix Salons, Ulta, AT&T just announced 1,000 stores. We're probably going to do 10 more stores in Memphis. I mean, these are great things that are happening. Trader Joe's opens. That's opening day. Packed parking lot. Everybody's waiting for it. Awesome. But know what's going to follow? Container Store. Great retailers that are coming to Memphis looking at on that part. Restaurants. Food is a true anchor. Everybody wants to eat. We finally realized that chef-driven restaurants, those chain restaurants, those fast food, are really what people want, and that created balance. So we have restaurants opening, whether it's Elwood Shells, Porch and Parlor, Elementos, Wolf River Brisket Company, P.O. Press, walking in, Global Cafe, all different types of retail. Really cool stuff happening all throughout Memphis. Now, we're talking about building communities and building neighborhoods. Unlike any other place, shopping centers are built around the needs of the communities. We become an amenity to the community, and we want to fully integrate in that neighborhood while building value into them. Shopping centers, retail areas are an integral part of the social fabric of community. We need those new retail environments, the reimagined retail environments, woven into our communities, our neighborhoods, to make it easy for people to walk down to go to eat, to get an ice cream cone. Now, these are some of my more exciting ones, tenants that we had. Binghamton Gateway. We moved a nonprofit Inspire Cafe that's going in at Binghamton. Stardust Jiu-Jitsu. This is a retailer that opened that has no revenue. All their money comes from donations, offering martial art lessons to the kids in the neighborhood. This is where retail, it can be reimagined. It doesn't always have to be what we thought it was before. You see a picture of the Binghamton Gateway. I love Lucy J's. So I was one of my favorite tenants that I had the opportunity to participate in. They brought in workers to support the Dorothy Day House, but bringing in $15 hour jobs to help mothers make a living and get moving forward. Global Cafe is awesome. I mean, I didn't have anything to do with it, but the food is absolutely fantastic at that point. Beer. I just heard, I don't know, I found out that Wiseacre bought some land downtown. They're going to build a nice big brewery just south of the Forum. Beer has changed the community, whether it's over in Cooper Young, Broad Street. All these breweries that are opening up go into regentrified areas first, and they really kind of make a change. Now, why do customers want to shop in stores? Customers want it now. Okay, they don't want it next day, even now. They want it really now. They want to touch and feel. Gen Z and millennials love to shop, especially the Gen Z coming along. They want that physical store, but the stores have got to provide a real experience. We can't just think like where somebody's head's down. I go into stores where people's heads down and they don't even look at me when I give them my money. They want experiences. They don't want to pay a delivery charge, and they want to support local. That is a big change where we have local businesses. A lot of my work in the past, and I've been in it 32 years and 16 years at my current company, we're doing all national chains. About 50% of my work now is from local tenants, which is really kind of cool. They want it convenience. So if you missed the first two items, the customers want it now and they want to touch and feel it and they want to experience on that part. Retail fused industrial growth. We just saw a $15 million permit for TJX, okay, be pulled. Amazon just built 2 warehouses here that I saw on Andy's slide. That's fueling their next 2,000 stores. Five Below has a warehouse. They go together. It's synonymous between industrial and retail. They're working together to service all of us, the customers. Retail, those retailers that focus on customer experience and retail will succeed. Shopping centers are a vital part of our community, providing great tax dollars. Retail real estate isn't about collecting rent. It helps nearing 13 million Americans have jobs. You know, food is the #1 employer in all of America. Between the farms to the restaurants to the grocery stores, #1 employer in America. Bricks and clicks are not either or. They're a relationship together, offering the best experience and the best product to people. Retail is not dying, but it is challenging. It is very much challenging as we go along. It's reached an inflection point. The retail is right-sizing. It's changing, evolving. Retail and property landlords need to invest in the experience. I love that Steve talked about, I go once a month to Crescent Center. I love that what they're doing out in the parking lots, all part of that experience. The retailers, parking lots that need to be downsized, changed, added, green space, community space need to happen. It's not bricks or clicks versus online, but both working together. And that's where retail is going. Questions and answers. And
I've got questions, but we can start with just questions from the audience. We'll do this until we get tired. So if people have questions on any part of what people talked about, yeah, up in the back there. And I'm going to repeat briefly the questions again, just for the recording, which was about income levels and the sustainability of the question to Blake, higher rents relative to multifamily.
Sure, yeah, and Memphis, in a lot of ways, is a little bit behind the times. So the major markets started doing this, and then finally, as deals started trading post-recession, you started seeing the value add start, taking shape and more people doing it. Income levels, I think we're seeing. It started out in the A submarkets, your Germantowns, your downtowns, but it is quickly moved into other areas. I think that our workforce housing, maybe upper blue collar submarkets and better are seeing that. And you go down a little bit further down the chain, it's more kind of more rent sensitive. So. Unless they're real distressed properties, you don't see our C submarkets really doing that intentionally. You're doing it by default because they're essentially foreclosed. So I think your B and better submarkets are seeing that, obviously to various levels. But people want the newer, the newer flashes, the granite, the stainless steel appliances. But without a lot of homes being built right now, you're having to get that in the apartment space, and not everybody can afford a $2 a foot, brand new apartment downtown.
To what extent, I mean, there's all this talk right now of changing up the way Edge works with Chamber and the whole economic development incentives. Any of y'all want to? I mean, I'll go to the politician, the official politician on the panel about what you hear needs to happen from your perspective on offices, forgetting to the degree possible that you're a city council person. Where are we with incentives? And the critics who say, one, we rely too much on incentives, and then the second part is we just don't have a streamlined process for even delivering those incentives and the other, recruitment efforts into Memphis.
That was a long question.
I know.
No, I mean, I think, gosh, there's a lot to unpack there. I think the challenge is, using incentives wisely, and I mean, they're everywhere. Everybody wished they weren't, but they are, and so you have to have them. And I think the way on the office side and industrial side, they're a bit different. And so when you are competing with North Mississippi, it is a lot faster, easier down there, much more streamlined. And so I think the challenge and the opportunity really, because we have to find a balance in Memphis of when you're effectively giving away taxpayer dollars, how do you do it in an effective way to do it when only when you need to do it, to make sure that underserved areas of the community are also benefiting as well. And I think that's kind of the opportunity, is to find the balance of where it can be faster, be more efficient, but not be so burdensome and you have policies where it drives people away. And I'll tell you that I know that when we had the residency requirement going back a decade ago, where, which was unconstitutional, I think, but we had a policy that said you had 75% of your employees had to live within Memphis and Shelby County. And I mean, companies can't mandate that. And I think if you look at where our company's located, most of the people are going to live there anyway. And that's some of the things we talked about today. And so we're still kind of getting over that as a community in terms of the people that make a lot of these decisions nationally, in terms of where companies are going and placing capital. So it's a very breakable toy, and it's about just finding the balance with being responsible with taxpayer dollars, but doing it in a way that continues to grow the economy. And I'm sure with the leadership around the table, we'll get there.
Shawn, you were pointing at the Binghamton Shopping Center, which is right. If you didn't know where it was, it's on Sam Cooper, right at that corner, and it's at Tillman, and yeah. But there were incentives involved with that. Would that have been right? I think I'm right about that.
Well, it was a community pilot. Without the opportunity to get that community pilot, that center would not happen, nor would the proposed Fraser Gateway Center that we're building at Hollywood and 240. To go back into an urban area that might be a little bit more disenfranchised area, we need those incentives to subsidize the rent that we can't get from the retailers to justify new construction. We found that there are retailer demand in these areas, but they want new shopping centers. They don't want to go into a blighted shopping center. They do not want to go into an area where it's not a conducive, good merchandise mix, and without the incentives, would not happen.
All right, I think we're good, and we're going to do a drawing here, and Janice is